Have fun with the fish, Mom, my grandson Ethan said as he pushed me off the yacht. My daughter Keisha and her husband Chuck just stood there watching me fall. Their plan was simple: steal my $500,000 savings after I drowned. But when they came home that night, they saw me sitting right there in my favorite chair with a very special surprise waiting for them. If you're watching this story, let me know where you're from in the comments. Now let me back up and tell you how a perfectly normal Tuesday morning ended with me falling into the cold Atlantic Ocean. I suppose I should have seen it coming, but at 75 years old, I still believed that family meant something, that your own blood would never hurt you. That love was stronger than money. The morning started out so nice. Keisha had called me herself, not a text message like usual, asking if I wanted to go on a special boat trip. Mom, we rented this beautiful yacht to celebrate how strong you've been since Dad died, she said. Her voice sounded so sweet and caring. I should have known something was wrong right there. Keisha never spent money on anything nice. She always said we needed to save every penny. But I was just so happy that my daughter wanted to do something special with me. You see, after my husband Harold passed away 2 years ago, I felt so lonely. Our little house felt too big and too quiet. But Keisha and Chuck and Ethan, they became my whole world. They'd come over for Sunday dinner every week. Ethan would help me with my garden. Chuck would fix things around the house. And Keisha would always hug me and say, Mom, what would we do without you? I had worked hard my whole life. Harold and I saved every dollar we could. When he died, his life insurance left me with enough money to live comfortably and maybe leave something nice for the kids someday. I kept it all in a simple savings account at First National Bank downtown. Nothing fancy, just our life's work sitting there safe and sound. So when Keisha called about this yacht trip, I thought, how wonderful. My family wants to make me feel special. I went to my closet and picked out my nicest dress, a pretty blue one I'd bought for Harold's funeral but never wore again. I packed my overnight bag with my heart pills and my favorite book. I was so excited, I could barely sleep the night before. The next morning, Chuck picked me up in his big black truck. He was wearing a fancy polo shirt and sunglasses, looking like he was ready for a magazine photo. Morning, Mom, he said with that big smile of his. Ready for the best day of your life? Keisha was already in the front seat, and she turned around to give me a kiss on the cheek. She smelled like expensive perfume, the kind I could never afford. You look beautiful, Mom, she said. That blue dress is perfect. Ethan was sitting next to me in the back seat, and he reached over to hold my hand. Grandma, I can't wait to take pictures of you on the boat. You're going to look like a movie star. My heart just melted. This sweet boy, my grandson, was so excited to spend the day with me. I squeezed his hand back and said, Oh, honey, you're going to make your old grandma cry happy tears. The drive to the marina took about an hour. We talked and laughed the whole way. Chuck told funny stories about his work. Keisha asked me about my garden and my book club at church. Ethan showed me pictures on his phone of a girl he liked at school. It felt so normal, so perfect, like the family I had always dreamed of having. When we got to the marina, I couldn't believe my eyes. There were boats everywhere, big ones, small ones, fancy ones with tall white sails. The water sparkled blue-green in the morning sun, and seagulls were flying around making their loud calls. There she is, Chuck said, pointing to a beautiful white yacht tied up at the dock. The Sea Dreams. Isn't she gorgeous? The boat was bigger than I expected. It had 2 levels and big windows and a deck where you could sit and watch the water. I had never been on anything so fancy in my whole life. Come on, Mom, Keisha said, taking my arm. Let's get you aboard. Ethan grabbed my small suitcase and helped me step onto the boat. The deck felt solid under my feet, but I could feel it moving slightly with the waves. It made my stomach flutter a little bit. Don't worry, Grandma, Ethan said, seeing my nervous face. I'll stay right next to you the whole time. I won't let anything happen to you. Those words. I remember them so clearly now. I won't let anything happen to you. If only I had known what was really going to happen. Chuck started the engine, and soon we were moving away from the dock. The wind felt good on my face, and I sat on a cushioned bench watching the land get smaller and smaller behind us. Keisha brought me a glass of lemonade and sat down next to me. Are you having fun, Mom? She asked. Oh yes, honey, I said. This is the most wonderful thing anyone has ever done for me. She smiled, but when I think about it now, her smile looked a little sad, maybe even guilty. But at the time, I just thought she was being sweet. We sailed for about an hour, going further and further from shore. The water was getting deeper and darker blue. There were no other boats around us anymore, just endless ocean in every direction. Perfect spot, Chuck called out from where he was driving the boat. Nice and private out here. Ethan was taking pictures of me with his phone. Smile, Grandma. You look so happy. And I was happy. I was having the time of my life. My family had brought me to this beautiful place to celebrate me, to show me how much they loved me. I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. That's when Chuck turned off the engine. The boat got very quiet. All you could hear was the sound of waves lapping against the sides and the seagulls in the distance. Why are we stopping? I asked. We wanted to have a little ceremony out here, Keisha said. Her voice sounded different now. Colder. Something special, just for you, Mom. Chuck and Ethan came over to where we were sitting. All three of them were standing around me now, looking down at me sitting on that bench. Something felt wrong. The way they were looking at me, it wasn't loving anymore. It was like they were looking at a problem they needed to solve. What kind of ceremony? I asked. My voice sounded small and scared, even to me. That's when Chuck reached into a bag and pulled out some papers. Well, Mom, we need you to sign these documents first. What documents? I asked, my heart starting to beat faster. Just some paperwork, Keisha said quickly. To make sure everything is taken care of properly. Chuck handed me the papers, but when I tried to read them, the words seemed to swim around on the page. I reached for my reading glasses in my purse, but Ethan gently took my hand. Don't worry about reading all that boring stuff, Grandma, he said. It's just legal things. Mom and Dad will explain it to you. But I pulled my hand away and put on my glasses anyway. What I saw made my blood run cold. The papers were forms to transfer all my money to Keisha and Chuck. My savings account, my house, even my car. Everything Harold and I had worked for our whole lives. And at the bottom, there was a line for my signature. I don't understand, I said, looking up at their faces. Why would I sign these? Because, Mom, Keisha said, and her voice was different now. Hard. Mean. You're not going to need that money anymore. What do you mean? Chuck laughed, but it wasn't a nice laugh. Come on, Helen. You're 75 years old. You had a good life. Time to let the younger generation take over. I stood up from the bench, my legs shaking. I'm not signing anything. Take me back to shore right now. I'm afraid that's not going to happen, Chuck said. That's when I looked at Ethan, my sweet grandson, the boy I had rocked to sleep when he was little, the boy who helped me plant tomatoes every spring. Ethan, I said, reaching for him. Honey, tell them to take me home. But Ethan stepped back from me. His face looked terrible, like he was about to cry or throw up. I'm sorry, Grandma, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Sorry for what? But even as I asked, I was starting to understand. The pieces were falling into place like a horrible puzzle. The thing is, Mom, Keisha said, moving closer to me, Chuck and I are in a lot of debt. A lot. We're about to lose everything, our house, our cars, everything. We need your money to save ourselves. But you could have just asked me, I said, backing away from them. I would have helped you. I'm your mother. Asked for $500,000? Chuck snorted. Right. You would have given us maybe 5,000 and told us to figure out the rest ourselves. But you can't just take my money, I said. That's stealing. It's not stealing if you're dead, Keisha said quietly. Dead. The word hit me like a slap in the face. I looked around at the endless ocean surrounding us. No other boats. No land in sight. Just deep, dark water, and my family standing there looking at me like I was already gone. You brought me out here to kill me, I said. It wasn't a question. We brought you out here to say goodbye, Chuck said. Think of it as a gift. A quick, clean end instead of years of doctors and hospitals and slowly losing your mind in some nursing home. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These people I had loved, had trusted, had welcomed into my home every Sunday for dinner. They were talking about murdering me like it was a business decision. Please, I said, and I hated how my voice sounded so weak and scared. Please don't do this. I'll give you whatever money you need. We can work something out. Sorry, Mom, Keisha said. But this is the only way that works for us. If you just give us the money, people will ask questions. But if you have an accident, well, accidents happen to old people all the time. I turned to Ethan one more time. Honey, please. You don't have to do this. You're a good boy. This isn't you. Tears were running down his face now. I know, Grandma. I know I'm not good. But they said if I didn't help them, they'd lose the house and we'd all be homeless. I can't let that happen to Mom. So you're going to let them kill your grandmother instead? He couldn't look at me anymore. He just stared down at the deck of the boat. That's enough talking, Chuck said. Helen, you can sign those papers and make this easy, or we can do this the hard way. Your choice. I looked at the pen in his hand, then at the papers that would give them everything Harold and I had ever worked for. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold them still. What happens if I sign? I asked. Then you have a nice, peaceful trip over the side. Chuck said like he was talking about the weather. Quick and easy. And if I don't sign? Then you have a not-so-peaceful trip over the side, Keisha said. But either way, Helen, you're going over. I realized then that there was no way out of this. They were going to kill me no matter what I did. The only choice was whether I made it easy for them or not. I'm not signing, I said, throwing the papers down on the deck. If you want to murder your own mother, you'll have to live with that for the rest of your lives. But I won't help you do it. Chuck's face got red and angry. Fine. Have it your way, old woman. He grabbed my arm hard, his fingers digging into my skin. I tried to pull away, but he was so much stronger than me. Ethan, he called. Get over here and help me. I can't, Ethan said, still crying. I can't touch her. You can and you will, Keisha snapped at him. We're all in this together now. You think you can back out? You think anyone will believe you didn't know what we were planning? I watched my grandson's face as she spoke. I could see the exact moment when he gave up fighting, when he decided that saving himself was more important than saving me. I'm sorry, Grandma, he whispered again as he walked toward me. No, honey, I said, backing toward the edge of the boat. Don't do this. You're better than this. But he wasn't. When Chuck told him to grab my other arm, he did it. When his mother told him to help push me toward the railing, he did that too. I fought them as hard as I could. I may have been 75 years old, but I had been strong my whole life. I had worked in factories, raised children, taken care of a sick husband. I didn't go down easy, but it was 3 against 1, and I was already tired from fighting. They dragged me to the side of the yacht where the railing was lowest. The water looked so dark and deep below us. I could see my reflection in it, like looking into a grave. Any last words, Mom? Keisha asked. She said it like she was making a joke. Yes, I said, looking right at her. I forgive you. That stopped her cold. For just a second, I saw something that might have been shame in her eyes. But I will never forget, I added. You won't have to, Chuck said. Ready, Ethan? My grandson nodded, fresh tears streaming down his face. On 3, Chuck said. 1. I closed my eyes and thought about Harold. About our wedding day, our first house, all the quiet Sunday mornings we had shared. 2. I thought about baby Keisha, how sweet she used to be. How she would curl up in my lap and ask me to read her stories. 3. They pushed me. I fell toward that dark water, and the last thing I heard was Ethan's voice calling out, Have fun with the fish, Mom. Not Mom. He meant to say Grandma. Even in that terrible moment, he got confused about who he was supposed to be talking to. The water was so cold it felt like knives cutting into my skin. It went over my head, into my nose and mouth and ears. Everything went dark and quiet except for the sound of my own heartbeat. But you know what? I didn't die. I don't know if it was pure stubbornness, or all those years of swimming at the community pool, or just plain anger that kept me alive. But I fought my way back to the surface, gasping and spitting out seawater. The yacht was already moving away from me. I could see the 3 of them standing at the back, watching me struggle in the water. Chuck had his arm around Keisha. Ethan was still crying. They watched me for maybe 30 seconds, making sure I was going to drown. Then they turned the boat around and headed back toward shore, leaving me alone in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. I treaded water and watched their boat get smaller and smaller until it was just a tiny white dot on the horizon. Then it was gone completely. That's when the real fear hit me. I was floating in the middle of nowhere, miles from land, with no one knowing where I was. The water was so cold my teeth were chattering, and my blue dress was heavy and pulling me down. But I wasn't ready to die. Not like this. Not because of their greed. I had learned to swim at the YMCA when I was 40 years old. Harold thought it was silly. What does a grown woman need to know how to swim for? But I wanted to learn anyway. Now I was grateful for every single lesson. I kicked off my good church shoes and let them sink to the bottom. They were too heavy. I needed to stay light, stay floating. The sun was getting lower in the sky. I knew that when it got dark, my chances of being found would be almost 0. I had to stay calm, had to think. That's when I saw it. A piece of white foam floating about 50 yards away from me. It looked like part of a cooler, the kind people bring on boats for their drinks and sandwiches. I swam toward it as fast as I could. My arms were already getting tired, and the salt water kept getting in my mouth and making me cough. But I made it. The foam piece was bigger than I thought, maybe 3 feet long and 2 feet wide. When I grabbed onto it, it held my weight and kept me floating. I pulled myself up on top of it as much as I could, getting my chest and arms out of the water. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was hope. I lay there on that piece of foam, holding on tight, watching the sun get lower and lower. My whole body was shaking from the cold. My lips felt numb. But I was alive. Come on, Helen, I said to myself out loud. You've been through worse than this. Remember when Harold was sick for 2 years and you took care of him every single day? Remember when you worked 2 jobs to pay for Keisha's college? You're stronger than you think. Talking to myself helped. It made me feel less alone out there in all that water. As the sun started to set, I heard something. A sound that wasn't just waves and wind. It was a motor. I lifted my head up as high as I could and looked around. There, maybe half a mile away, was a small fishing boat heading in my direction. I started waving my arms and yelling as loud as I could. Help! Help me! I'm over here. But they were too far away. They couldn't hear me over the sound of their engine. I watched in panic as the boat started to turn away, heading in a different direction. They were going to pass right by me and never know I was there. That's when I remembered something my Harold used to say. Sometimes you have to make your own luck. I took off my blue dress. It was the only bright thing I had with me. Standing on that piece of foam in just my slip and bra, I waved that dress over my head like a flag. Here. Over here. Help me. The boat kept going for what felt like forever. I thought they were gone, thought it was over. But then I saw them slow down. Stop. Turn around. They had seen me. The fishing boat came toward me, and I could see 2 men on board. One was older, maybe 60, with a gray beard and a baseball cap. The other was younger, maybe his son. Holy cow, the older man called out as they got closer. Ma'am, what are you doing out here? My family, I gasped, still holding onto my foam. They pushed me off their boat. The 2 men looked at each other with shocked faces. The younger one reached down and pulled me up into their boat. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. Let's get you wrapped up, the older man said, grabbing a blanket from a box. My name's Joe, and this is my son Danny. We're going to take care of you. They wrapped me in the blanket and gave me hot coffee from a thermos. It was the best thing I had ever tasted in my life. Ma'am, Joe said gently, did you say your family pushed you off a boat? I nodded, still shivering. My daughter and her husband and my grandson. They wanted my money. They thought I would drown. Danny was already on his radio, calling the Coast Guard. This is fishing vessel Mary Kate. We have an elderly woman we pulled from the water. She says she was pushed overboard by her family members. We need immediate assistance. As we headed back toward shore, Joe sat next to me and held my hand. You're safe now, he said. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore. But I wasn't thinking about being safe. I was thinking about revenge. Because Keisha and Chuck and Ethan thought I was dead at the bottom of the ocean. They thought they had gotten away with murder. They were probably back on land right now, acting sad, calling the police to report me missing. They had no idea that their victim was still alive. And that gave me the biggest advantage of all, the element of surprise. When we got back to the marina, there were already police cars and an ambulance waiting for us. The Coast Guard had called ahead. But I wasn't ready to talk to the police yet. I needed time to think, to plan. Officers, I said as they helped me onto the dock, I'm very tired and cold. Can I please go to the hospital first and talk to you tomorrow? I promise I'll tell you everything then. They agreed, and the paramedics took me to St. Mary's Hospital. The doctors checked me over, gave me warm blankets and hot soup, and said I was lucky to be alive. They wanted to keep me overnight for observation. That was perfect. It gave me time to think about what I was going to do next. I lay in that hospital bed all night, staring at the ceiling, planning my revenge. By morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. The first thing I did was call my friend Margaret from church. Margaret had worked as a secretary for a law firm for 30 years before she retired. She knew about legal things, and more importantly, she knew how to keep her mouth shut. Margaret, I said when she answered her phone, I need your help with something very important. Can you come to the hospital? And don't tell anyone you're coming to see me. Not anyone. She was there within an hour, carrying a big bag and looking very worried. Helen, what on earth happened to you? She asked, sitting down in the chair next to my bed. I told her everything. About the yacht trip, about the papers they wanted me to sign, about being pushed overboard and left to die. Margaret's face got angrier and angrier as I talked. Those horrible people, she said when I finished. We need to call the police right now. Not yet, I said. First, I need you to help me with something. They think I'm dead, Margaret. They think they got away with it. I want to let them think that for a little while longer. What do you mean? I need you to go to my house and get some things for me. But you have to be very careful. If anyone sees you, just say you're checking on the house for me while I'm in the hospital recovering from an accident. Margaret looked confused, but she nodded. What do you need? I need you to go to my bedroom closet. Behind my winter coats, there's a small safe. The combination is Harold's birthday, August 15th, 42. Inside that safe, you'll find copies of all my important papers. Bank statements, insurance policies, the deed to my house, everything. Okay, but why do you need those? Because I want to know exactly what they're trying to steal from me. And I want to be ready when they try to take it. Margaret left to go to my house, and I spent the rest of the day making phone calls. I called my bank and asked them to put a special watch on my account, to call me personally if anyone tried to make any big withdrawals or changes. I called my insurance company and asked them the same thing. I called my lawyer's office, even though Mr. Peterson had retired years ago. His young partner, Ms. Rodriguez, said she would help me with whatever I needed. By the time Margaret got back with my papers, I had built a whole team of people watching out for my money. People who would call me the minute Keisha and Chuck tried anything. I got everything, Margaret said, handing me a manila envelope. But Helen, I have to tell you something. When I was leaving your house, I saw Chuck's truck in your driveway. My heart started beating faster. What was he doing there? I don't know. I hid behind Mrs. Patterson's hedge and watched. He was there for maybe 20 minutes. When he came out, he was carrying a big garbage bag. A garbage bag? What was in it? I couldn't tell. But Helen, he looked around real nervous-like before he put it in his truck. Like he was doing something he shouldn't be doing. I opened the envelope and started looking through my papers. Everything was there, bank statements showing my $487,000 in savings, the deed to my house worth about $200,000, my life insurance policy for another $100,000. Almost $800,000 total. More than enough to kill for, apparently. But as I looked through the papers, I noticed something that made my blood boil. There were some documents in there I had never seen before. Papers with my signature on them. Except it wasn't really my signature. Someone had been practicing writing my name. And they had gotten pretty good at it. Margaret, I said, holding up one of the fake signatures. Look at this. She put on her reading glasses and studied the paper. That's not how you write your H, is it? No, it's not. Someone has been forging my signature. Probably for months. I thought about all those Sunday dinners, all those times Chuck had helped me with paperwork, all those occasions when Keisha had borrowed my checkbook, just for a minute, to look up my account number for something. They had been planning this for a long time. This wasn't something they thought up on the boat that day. This was a plan they had been working on for months, maybe even years. That made me even angrier. But it also made me smarter. If they had been planning this for so long, then they had probably made mistakes. Left evidence. Done things that could prove what they were really up to. Margaret, I said, I need you to do one more thing for me. Anything, honey. What is it? I need you to go to the police station and tell them I'm too upset to talk today, but I'll come in tomorrow to give my statement. Tell them I'm still in shock from my accident. Your accident? That's what we're calling it for now. An accident. I don't want them to know it was attempted murder until I'm ready. Margaret looked worried. Helen, are you sure about this? Shouldn't we tell the police everything right now? Trust me, I said. I know what I'm doing. I want Keisha and Chuck and Ethan to think they're safe for just a little bit longer. I want to see what they do next. Margaret left, and I spent the evening making more phone calls. I called my neighbor Mrs. Patterson and asked her to keep an eye on my house. I called the post office and asked them to hold my mail. I even called my doctor's office and rescheduled my appointment for next week. I wanted everything to look normal. Like I was just a sick old lady in the hospital, not someone who knew about their murder plot. The next morning, I checked myself out of the hospital. Instead of going home, I went to stay with Margaret. She had a nice guest room, and more importantly, she lived on the other side of town where nobody would see me. That afternoon, my phone started ringing. It was Keisha. I let it ring for a while before I answered it. Hello. Mom. Keisha's voice sounded panicked. Mom, where are you? We've been looking everywhere for you. I had to bite my tongue to keep from saying what I really wanted to say. Instead, I made my voice sound weak and confused. Keisha? Honey, I'm in the hospital. I had an accident yesterday. An accident? What kind of accident? Are you okay? I fell off the boat somehow. I don't really remember what happened. Everything is fuzzy. Some fisherman found me and brought me to shore. There was a long pause. Then Keisha said, You fell off the boat? But Mom, we looked everywhere for you. We called the Coast Guard and everything. You did. Of course we did. We were so worried when you just disappeared. Chuck thought maybe you went below deck to take a nap, and we didn't notice. Lies. All lies. They knew exactly what had happened to me. Well, I said, making my voice sound tired, I'm okay now. The doctors say I have a concussion, so I might not remember things clearly for a while. Oh, thank God you're safe, Keisha said, and she actually sounded relieved. We'll come see you right away. Which hospital are you at? I'm not at the hospital anymore. I'm staying with Margaret for a few days until I feel better. Margaret? Why Margaret? You should come home, Mom. We can take care of you. I'll bet you can, I thought. The doctor said I shouldn't be alone for a few days, just in case. You know how Margaret is. She'll fuss over me like a mother hen. But Mom, we want to take care of you ourselves. Your family. Family. That word tasted like poison in my mouth now. I know, sweetheart, but I'm already settled in here. Maybe you can come visit me tomorrow? I'm pretty tired right now. Of course. We'll be there first thing in the morning. Mom. Yes. We're just so glad you're alive. We were so scared we had lost you forever. After I hung up, I sat there shaking. Not from fear this time, but from pure anger. The nerve of that woman, pretending to be worried about me. Pretending to care. But her call told me something important. They really did think I didn't remember what happened. They thought the concussion had made me forget about them pushing me overboard. That was perfect. Let them think I was just a confused old lady who couldn't remember anything. That evening, Margaret and I sat at her kitchen table making plans. She had brought me more clothes from my house, and she had also brought something else, her son's old video camera. I thought maybe we could record them, she said. Get them to confess what they did. That's a great idea. But how? Well, they're coming here tomorrow morning. What if I hid the camera somewhere in the living room and let it record the whole visit? I thought about it. That might work, but I need to be very careful about what I say. I can't let them know that I remember anything. We spent the rest of the evening setting up the camera behind some books on Margaret's shelf. You couldn't see it unless you knew exactly where to look. The next morning, I put on my most pathetic-looking nightgown and got into Margaret's guest bed. When the doorbell rang at exactly 9 o'clock, I was ready for them. I could hear Margaret answering the door, then footsteps coming down the hall. Grandma, it was Ethan's voice, and he sounded genuinely worried. Are you okay? When they walked into the bedroom, I had to use every bit of acting ability I had ever learned to keep from screaming at them. There was Keisha with a big bouquet of flowers and a fake smile. There was Chuck carrying a box of chocolates and looking around the room like he was checking for something. And there was Ethan, my sweet grandson who had helped push me into the ocean to die. Oh my goodness, Mom, Keisha said, rushing over to hug me. You look so pale. Are you in pain? The hug made my skin crawl, but I hugged her back. I'm okay, honey. Just very tired. And my memory is still fuzzy about what happened on the boat. I watched Chuck's face when I said that. He relaxed a little bit, like he had been holding his breath. That's normal with concussions, he said, sitting down in the chair next to the bed. The important thing is that you're safe now. Safe. From the man who had tried to murder me less than 3 days ago. Tell us what you remember, Mom, Keisha said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Maybe we can help fill in the gaps. I pretended to think hard, pressing my fingers to my temples like my head hurt. Well, I remember being on that beautiful boat. And I remember feeling so happy that you all wanted to spend the day with me. Ethan was standing at the foot of the bed, and when I looked at him, he quickly looked away. What else? Chuck asked, leaning forward in his chair. I remember we stopped the boat somewhere. And then it gets fuzzy. I think maybe I stood up too fast. Sometimes my blood pressure medicine makes me dizzy. That's probably what happened, Keisha said quickly. You stood up and got dizzy and fell overboard before any of us could catch you. We tried to find you, Chuck added. We circled around for hours looking. We were so worried. More lies. They had watched me go under and then sailed away without a second glance. I feel so bad that I scared you all like that, I said, reaching over to pat Keisha's hand. "You must have been so frightened." "We were terrified," she said, and some tears even appeared in her eyes. She was a better actress than I thought. "But the important thing is that you're okay now," Chuck said. "And we're going to make sure nothing like this ever happens again." "What do you mean?" Chuck and Keisha looked at each other, like they were having a silent conversation. "Well, Mom," Keisha said carefully, "this accident made us realize how dangerous it is for you to be living alone. What if something happened to you at home and no one was there to help?" I felt my stomach drop. Here it comes, I thought. "We think maybe it's time for you to consider moving into a nice assisted living facility," Chuck said. "Somewhere with nurses and doctors nearby, just in case." "But I love my house," I said, making my voice sound small and sad. "Harold and I lived there for 43 years. "I know, Mom, but think about it. You'd have people around all the time. You'd make new friends. And we could visit you whenever you wanted. It would be so much safer," Chuck added. "And honestly, it would be a relief for us to know you're being looked after properly." I could see exactly what they were doing. Get me declared incompetent because of the concussion. Move me into some nursing home where I couldn't make my own decisions. Then take control of all my money legally. "I don't know," I said. "It sounds expensive. I don't think I can afford something like that." "Don't worry about the money," Keisha said. "We can help you figure out the finances. Maybe we could sell your house and use that money to pay for the facility." "Sell my house?" I let my voice get higher and more upset. "But that's our house. Mine and Harold's." "Mom, calm down," Keisha said, rubbing my arm. "We don't have to decide anything today. Let's just think about it, okay? We brought you some paperwork to look at," Chuck said, pulling out a folder from his jacket. "Just information about a really nice place called Sunset Manor. They have a waiting list, but we might be able to get you in." Sunset Manor. I knew that place. It was where old people went to die. The kind of place where families dumped relatives they didn't want to deal with anymore. "I'm too tired to look at papers right now," I said, closing my eyes. "My head hurts." "Of course," Keisha said. "We'll leave them here with Margaret. You can look at them when you feel better." They stayed for another hour, making small talk and pretending to care about how I was feeling. The whole time, Chuck kept looking around the room, and I realized he was probably wondering if I had said anything to Margaret about what really happened on the boat. Finally, they got ready to leave. "We'll come back tomorrow to check on you," Keisha said, kissing my forehead. The kiss felt like ice. "And Mom," Chuck said from the doorway, "try not to worry about anything. We're going to take care of everything for you." After they left, Margaret and I sat in her kitchen, replaying the whole conversation. "Did you get all of that?" I asked. "Every word," she said, patting the camera. "Helen, they're trying to steal everything from you." "I know, but now we have proof of what they're planning. They want to put me in a nursing home and sell my house." "That's not the worst part," Margaret said, looking at the folder Chuck had left behind. "Look at this." She showed me the papers about Sunset Manor. But there were other documents in there too. Forms to have me declared mentally incompetent. Papers to give Keisha power of attorney over my finances. Applications to be my legal guardians. They had come prepared to take control of my entire life. "There's something else," Margaret said, pulling out another paper. "Look at this." It was a copy of my life insurance policy. But someone had written notes all over it in Chuck's handwriting. Notes about how much money they would get when I died. At the bottom, in Chuck's messy writing, were the words, "Accidental death, double payout." My hands started shaking as I read those words. They hadn't just planned to kill me. They had planned to collect double the insurance money by making it look like an accident. That's when I realized that pushing me off the boat wasn't the end of their plan. It was just the beginning. "Well," I said to Margaret, holding up Chuck's insurance notes, "if they want to play games, let's give them a game they'll never forget." The next morning, I called Ms. Rodriguez, the lawyer, and asked her to meet me at Margaret's house. When she arrived, I showed her everything: the forged signatures, Chuck's insurance calculations, and the video of their visit. "Mrs. Thompson," she said after watching the recording, "this is attempted murder. We need to call the police immediately." "Not yet," I said. "I want to have a little fun with them first." Ms. Rodriguez looked at me like I had lost my mind. "Fun. They tried to kill you." "Exactly. And now they think they got away with it. Do you know how rare it is to catch criminals red-handed like this? I want to make sure we get them for everything." I spent the next few days setting my trap. First, I called Keisha and told her I had been thinking about what she said. You know what, honey? I said, making my voice sound weak and confused. Maybe you're right about that assisted living place. Maybe I am too old to live by myself anymore. I could practically hear Keisha's excitement through the phone. Oh, Mom, that's wonderful. You're making the right choice. But I have one little problem, I continued. I went to the bank yesterday to check on my accounts, and I'm having trouble understanding all those numbers. Could Chuck maybe come with me tomorrow to help me figure out my finances? Of course. Chuck would be happy to help. He's so good with money. Oh, I'll bet he is, I thought. The next day, Chuck picked me up at Margaret's house. I had put on my most confused old lady outfit, a flowered dress that was too big for me, thick glasses, and a purse the size of a suitcase that I kept digging around in like I couldn't find anything. Now, Chuck, I said as we drove to the bank, I hope you can help me understand all this banking stuff. Ever since my accident, numbers just don't make sense to me anymore. Don't worry, Mom, he said with that fake smile. I'll take care of everything. When we got to First National Bank, I made a big show of being confused about which door to use and where the teller windows were. Chuck had to guide me by the arm like I was completely helpless. I'd like to speak to someone about my accounts, I told the teller, speaking extra loud like old people do. This is my son-in-law, Chuck. He's going to help me because I can't understand numbers anymore since I hit my head. The teller, a sweet young girl named Jessica, looked at Chuck with sympathy. Of course, Mrs. Thompson. Let me get Mr. Williams, our account manager. While we waited, I kept up my act. I dropped my purse and scattered papers everywhere. I asked Chuck the same question 3 times. I even pretended to forget his name. Now, what did you say your name was again, dear? I asked him loudly enough for everyone in the bank to hear. Chuck, Mom. I'm Chuck, Keisha's husband. Oh yes, that's right. Chuck, you're such a good boy to help your old mother-in-law with her money troubles. I could see Chuck getting embarrassed as other customers started staring at us. Perfect. When Mr. Williams came out, I really put on a show. Oh, thank goodness, I said, grabbing his hand with both of mine. I'm so confused about everything. I had an accident and bumped my head, and now I can't remember anything about my bank accounts. I'm sorry to hear that, Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Williams said kindly. How can I help you today? Well, Chuck here thinks I should move into one of those nursing homes, and we need to figure out if I have enough money. But I can't remember how much I have or where I put it all. Mr. Williams looked at Chuck, who nodded seriously. She's been having memory problems since her accident, Chuck said. We're just trying to help her get her affairs in order. Of course, Mr. Williams said. Let's go into my office and we can review everything. In the office, Mr. Williams pulled up my accounts on his computer. Well, Mrs. Thompson, you have a savings account with a balance of $487,000, a checking account with $2,300, and a certificate of deposit for $50,000. I pretended to be shocked. That much? How did I get so much money? According to our records, most of it came from a life insurance payout 2 years ago. Life insurance? I looked at Chuck with big, confused eyes. What's life insurance? Chuck leaned forward eagerly. It's money that Harold left you when he died, Mom. Remember? Harold? Oh yes, my husband. Poor Harold. I miss him so much. I dabbed at my eyes with a tissue from my giant purse. Now, Chuck said to Mr. Williams, Mrs. Thompson is worried about managing all this money by herself. She was thinking maybe it would be easier if someone else could help her with it. Here we go, I thought. This is where he makes his move. What kind of help did you have in mind? Mr. Williams asked. Well, maybe if I was added to her accounts, just so I could help her pay her bills and make sure she doesn't get confused about her finances. Mr. Williams looked at me. Mrs. Thompson, would you like to add Mr. Chuck to your accounts? I blinked at him like I didn't understand the question. Add him to what now? Your bank accounts, so he can help you manage your money. Oh yes, that sounds good. Chuck is such a nice boy. He can have all my money if he wants it. Chuck's eyes lit up like Christmas morning, but Mr. Williams looked concerned. Mrs. Thompson, are you sure you understand what you're saying? You'd be giving Mr. Chuck complete access to all of your funds. Is that bad? I asked, looking back and forth between them like a confused child. Mr. Williams cleared his throat. Well, it's a big decision. Usually we recommend that people think about it for a few days before making changes this significant. Oh, but I can't think anymore, I said, tapping my head. My brain doesn't work right since my accident. That's why Chuck needs to think for me. I could see Chuck getting frustrated that Mr. Williams wasn't just handing over my money immediately. "Look," Chuck said, his voice getting a little sharper. "She clearly can't handle her own finances anymore. We're just trying to help her before she does something crazy with all that money." "Crazy like what?" I asked innocently. Chuck looked at me like I was an idiot. Like giving it all away to some scammer on the phone, or buying things you don't need. "Oh," I said, clapping my hands together. "Like that time I almost bought those magazines from that nice man who called? You're so smart, Chuck." Mr. Williams was taking notes, and I could tell he was getting suspicious of Chuck's eagerness. "Mrs. Thompson," Mr. Williams said gently, "do you have any other family members who might be able to help you with this decision? A daughter, perhaps?" "Oh yes, my daughter Keisha. She's Chuck's wife. She's so pretty and smart. Maybe we should have her here too before we make any changes to your accounts," Mr. Williams suggested. Chuck's face turned red. "That's not necessary. Keisha and I make all our financial decisions together. She trusts me completely." "I'm sure she does," Mr. Williams said diplomatically. "But for something this important, I think it would be best to have all family members present." I decided to help Chuck dig his hole a little deeper. "You know what?" I said, pulling out my phone and nearly dropping it twice. "Let me call Keisha right now." "Mom, no," Chuck said quickly. "She's at work. She's very busy." "Oh, but she'll want to know about this. She loves money almost as much as you do." Chuck's eye started twitching. "What I mean is, she doesn't need to be bothered with banking details. She trusts me to handle these things." I pretended to dial Keisha's number, but actually called Margaret instead. "Hello, Keisha, honey?" I said loudly. "I'm at the bank with Chuck, and he wants to help me with all my money. Isn't that wonderful?" Margaret, bless her heart, played along perfectly. "Oh my goodness, Helen. How much money are we talking about? The nice man here says I have almost $600,000. Can you believe that? I'm rich." I could hear Margaret gasp on the other end. "We had rehearsed this, but she was a good actress. Chuck wants to put his name on all my accounts so he can take care of everything for me," I continued, "since my brain doesn't work anymore." "Helen," Margaret said, sounding worried, "maybe you should think about that for a while. That's a lot of money. But Chuck says I might give it all away to strangers if he doesn't help me." I looked at Chuck, who was now sweating despite the air conditioning. "You did say that, didn't you, Chuck?" "Ah, yes, but—" Chuck was starting to stammer. Mr. Williams leaned forward. "Mr. Chuck, exactly what kind of help are you planning to provide Mrs. Thompson?" "Just, making sure her bills get paid. Maybe investing her money in some better accounts that earn more interest." "What kind of investments?" Mr. Williams asked. Chuck's face went blank. "Well, good ones. Safe ones. Can you be more specific?" Look, I don't think we need to get into all the details right now. The important thing is that Mrs. Thompson needs help managing her money." I decided to really stir the pot. "Oh, Chuck," I said, digging around in my huge purse again. "I almost forgot. I found these papers at home with your handwriting on them. Something about my insurance money." I pulled out copies of Chuck's notes about my life insurance policy, the ones that said accidental death, double payout. Chuck's face went white as a sheet. "What are these papers, dear?" I asked, holding them up so Mr. Williams could see them too. Those aren't. Where did you find those?" Chuck was practically stuttering now. "In my kitchen drawer. You must have left them there when you were helping me with my paperwork." "What does accidental death, double payout mean?" Mr. Williams took the papers and read them carefully. His expression got very serious very fast. "Mr. Chuck," he said slowly, "why do you have notes about Mrs. Thompson's life insurance benefits?" "I don't. Those aren't mine. Someone else must have written those." "But it looks like your handwriting," I said helpfully. "See, it says Chuck right at the top." Chuck started to stand up. "You know what? Maybe this isn't a good time to do this. Mrs. Thompson seems confused. Maybe we should come back when she's feeling better." "Oh no, don't go," I said, grabbing his arm. Mr. Williams was just about to explain to me what all these numbers mean. Mr. Williams was already reaching for his phone. "Actually, Mr. Chuck, I think I need to make a phone call before we proceed with anything." "To who?" Chuck asked nervously. "Our fraud prevention department. It's just standard procedure when we see unusual patterns in account access requests." Chuck bolted for the door so fast he knocked over his chair. "Chuck," I called after him. "Where are you going?" We haven't finished helping me with my money. But he was already running through the bank lobby like his pants were on fire. I turned to Mr. Williams with my most innocent smile. I guess Chuck remembered he had somewhere else to be. Should we wait for him to come back? Mr. Williams looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled back. Mrs. Thompson, he said quietly, your memory seems to be working just fine. I winked at him. Funny how a good shock can cure a concussion, isn't it? Mr. Williams laughed out loud. Mrs. Thompson, I have to say, that was the best performance I've ever seen in 20 years of banking. Thank you, dear. I was in my church's drama club for 15 years. You pick up a few things. After we finished at the bank, I called Margaret from the parking lot. Operation Chuck is a Crook was a complete success, I told her. He ran out of there so fast he left skid marks on the carpet. When I got back to Margaret's house, my phone was ringing nonstop. First it was Chuck. Helen, he said, and his voice was shaky. I think there was some kind of misunderstanding at the bank today. Misunderstanding? I asked, putting on my confused voice again. What kind of misunderstanding, Chuck? Well, you seemed different. More alert. And those papers you showed the banker. Oh, those. I'm so glad you reminded me. I found a whole bunch more papers with your handwriting on them when I was looking through my kitchen drawers. Should I bring them to the next family dinner? There was a long pause. What kind of papers? Oh, all sorts of things. Lists of my bank account numbers, copies of my house deed, even some practice sheets where you were learning to write my signature. You must have been planning some kind of surprise for me. The phone went dead. Chuck had hung up on me. 5 minutes later, Keisha called. Mom, Chuck is very upset. He says you were acting strange at the bank today. Strange how, honey? He says you were pretending to be more confused than you really are. And you showed some banker private family papers. Private family papers? You mean those insurance notes where Chuck calculated how much money he'd get when I die? I thought those were just math homework. I could hear Keisha whispering frantically to someone in the background. Mom, we need to talk. Can we come over? Of course. But I should warn you, I've been having the most interesting conversations today. I called my lawyer, my insurance company, and even that nice Detective Martinez from the police department. Everyone wants to hear about my little boating accident. You called the police? Keisha's voice went up 3 octaves. Well, yes, dear. I figured I should report my accident properly. Detective Martinez said it was very unusual that I fell off a boat and nobody saw me go overboard. He wants to interview all of you tomorrow. Mom, don't say anything else to anyone until we get there, okay? Oh, but I've already said so much. Detective Martinez was especially interested when I told him about Chuck's insurance calculations. He said that kind of planning ahead was very, what was the word he used? Oh yes, suspicious. The line went quiet for a moment. We'll be right there, Keisha said and hung up. Margaret and I spent the next hour setting up for their visit. We put fresh batteries in the video camera. We called Ms. Rodriguez and asked her to come over with some legal papers. We even called Detective Martinez. Yes, he was a real person, and asked him to stop by around 7 o'clock. This is going to be better than any soap opera, Margaret said, adjusting the camera behind her plants. When Keisha, Chuck, and Ethan arrived, they looked like they were going to a funeral, which, in a way, they were the funeral of their get-rich-quick scheme. Mom, Keisha said, sitting down very carefully on Margaret's couch. We need to clear up some misunderstandings. Misunderstandings? I asked, settling into my favorite chair with a cup of tea. What kind of misunderstandings? Chuck leaned forward, trying to look sincere. Helen, when you were in the hospital, you said you couldn't remember what happened on the boat. But today at the bank, you seemed to remember everything perfectly. Did I? How strange. Maybe my memory is coming back bit by bit. Like right now, I'm starting to remember standing at the back of that boat, and you two looking at me with the strangest expressions. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. And I'm starting to remember some papers you wanted me to sign, I continued thoughtfully. Something about giving you all my money? Mom, you're confused, Keisha said quickly. We never asked you to sign anything like that. Oh, but I found the papers. They're right here in my purse. I reached into my giant bag and started pulling out documents. Let's see. Here's the form to transfer my bank accounts to you. Here's the application to put me in that nursing home. Oh, and here's my favorite. The paper that would make you my legal guardian so I couldn't make my own decisions anymore. Their faces went from worried to terrified. Where did you get those? Chuck demanded. From your jacket pocket, dear. When you left it hanging on my kitchen chair last Sunday. I was just trying to hang it up properly, and all these papers fell out. That was a complete lie. I had gotten them from the folder Chuck brought to Margaret's house. But watching his face turn purple was worth the little fib. You went through my pockets, he sputtered. Well, I didn't want your papers to get wrinkled. I'm just a helpful old lady. Just then the doorbell rang. Oh, that must be Detective Martinez, I said cheerfully. I invited him over to hear about my boating accident. He said he had some very interesting questions for all of us. If Chuck had looked terrified before, now he looked like he was about to faint. Detective, Ethan squeaked. Oh yes, honey. It turns out that when someone falls off a boat and almost dies, the police like to investigate. Who knew? Margaret went to answer the door, and I could hear her talking to Detective Martinez in the hallway. Chuck was wiping sweat off his forehead with his sleeve. Keisha was staring at the floor, and poor Ethan looked like he was going to throw up. Should we leave? Chuck whispered to Keisha. Oh no, don't go, I said loudly. Detective Martinez specifically asked to meet with all of you. He said he has some very interesting questions about boat safety. Detective Martinez walked into the living room, and I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. He was a big, serious-looking man with a mustache, and when he saw my family sitting there looking guilty, his eyebrows went up. Good evening, folks, he said, pulling out a small notebook. I'm Detective Martinez. I understand you were all on the boat when Mrs. Thompson had her accident. Yes, sir, Chuck managed to croak out. Well, that's lucky for me. I can get everyone's statement at the same time. He sat down in Margaret's recliner and flipped open his notebook. Now, Mrs. Thompson, why don't you tell me what you remember about your accident? Oh, Detective, my memory has been so fuzzy since I hit my head, but it's been coming back in little pieces all day. What kind of pieces? I put my finger to my temple like I was thinking hard. Well, I remember we were all standing at the back of the boat, and I remember Chuck and Keisha talking about some papers they wanted me to sign. Papers? Detective Martinez looked at Chuck. What kind of papers? Chuck opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping for air. Oh, I can show you, I said helpfully, reaching into my purse again. I found copies of them earlier. Mom, maybe we shouldn't. Keisha started to say. Nonsense. The detective wants to understand what happened. I handed Detective Martinez the papers transferring my accounts. Chuck wanted me to sign these right there on the boat. He said it was very important. Detective Martinez studied the papers carefully. These would give Mr. Chuck complete control over your finances, Mrs. Thompson. Yes, isn't that sweet? He wanted to take care of my money for me. And what happened after they showed you these papers? I looked thoughtfully at the ceiling. That's where it gets fuzzy. But I think I said I didn't want to sign them. And then someone said something about me not needing the money anymore. Chuck made a strangled sound. Not needing the money anymore? Detective Martinez repeated, looking directly at Chuck. I never said that, Chuck stammered. Oh, but someone did, I said brightly. And then I remember feeling very scared. And then I was in the water. Detective Martinez turned to Ethan. Son, what's your version of events? Ethan looked at his parents, then at me, then at the floor. Grandma just fell. Just fell. She was standing near the edge, and she got dizzy and fell overboard. Detective Martinez made some notes. And what did you all do when she fell in? We looked for her. Keisha said quickly. We circled around for hours trying to find her. Hours? Detective Martinez raised an eyebrow. That's interesting, because the Coast Guard received your missing person report at 6:47 p.m. But according to the fisherman who rescued Mrs. Thompson, they found her at 6:15 p.m. That would mean you reported her missing after she was already rescued. The room went so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The times might be wrong. Chuck muttered. Oh, I don't think so, Detective Martinez said. The Coast Guard keeps very accurate records. He flipped a page in his notebook. They also said that when they contacted you to let you know Mrs. Thompson had been found, you seemed surprised that she was alive. Surprised she was alive? I gasped, putting my hand to my chest. Chuck, why would you be surprised I was alive if you were looking for me? Chuck was now turning an interesting shade of green. Furthermore, Detective Martinez continued, I spoke with the marina where you rented the yacht. They said you returned the boat at 5:30 p.m., but you didn't report Mrs. Thompson missing until over an hour later. We had to drive home first. Keisha said weakly. To drive home and report your mother missing? Instead of immediately calling from the marina, I decided to add a little more fuel to the fire. Oh, Detective, I said, reaching into my purse again. I almost forgot about this. I pulled out Chuck's insurance notes with the accidental death, double payout calculations. I found this paper with Chuck's handwriting on it. He was doing math about my life insurance. Isn't he thoughtful, planning ahead like that? Detective Martinez took the paper, and his expression got very serious. Mr. Chuck, can you explain why you were calculating life insurance payouts for Mrs. Thompson? That's not. I was just helping her understand her policies. By calculating how much money you'd receive if she died accidentally? The detective's voice was getting colder, and Chuck looked like he was about to pass out. I think, Detective Martinez said, standing up and closing his notebook. We need to continue this conversation down at the station. Are we under arrest? Keisha whispered. Not yet, Detective Martinez said. But I have a few more questions, and I think the station would be a better place to ask them. I couldn't resist one last little jab. Oh, detective. I called out as they all stood up to leave. Should I tell them about the other things I remembered? Like how Ethan helped push me, and how Chuck said, have fun with the fish? Chuck actually did faint then. Right there in Margaret's living room, he went down like a sack of potatoes. Well, Margaret said, looking down at Chuck sprawled on her carpet. I guess we'll need some smelling salts. Detective Martinez sighed and called for backup and an ambulance. While we waited for them to arrive, Keisha sat on the edge of the couch crying, and Ethan just stared at his unconscious stepfather on the floor. Grandma, Ethan said quietly, how long have you remembered everything? Since the moment I hit that cold water, honey, I said, sitting down next to him. Every single detail. Why didn't you just call the police right away? I looked at this boy who had helped push me into the ocean, this child I had raised and loved and trusted, because I needed to know how far you all would go. I needed to see if there was any part of my real family left, or if the people I loved had been completely replaced by strangers. Ethan started crying then. Not the fake tears he'd shown on the boat, but real, ugly sobbing. I'm so sorry, Grandma. I didn't want to do it. But Mom said we'd lose everything. She said you'd want to help us if you could. By killing me? She said it would be quick. She said you wouldn't suffer. She said it was better than watching you get old and sick. I felt my heart break a little bit more. This was my grandson, my sweet boy, and they had twisted his love for his family into something dark and terrible. Ethan, I said, taking his hand, did you really believe that pushing your grandmother into the ocean was an act of love? He shook his head, still crying. No, I knew it was wrong, but I was scared of what would happen to us if I didn't help. The paramedics arrived and woke Chuck up. He was groggy and confused, and when he saw Detective Martinez still standing there with his notebook, he tried to get up and run again. But this time there were 2 police officers blocking the door. Mr. Chuck, Detective Martinez said, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and fraud. Mrs. Keisha, you're also under arrest on the same charges. As they read them their rights and put handcuffs on them, I felt something I didn't expect. Not happiness or satisfaction, but just sadness. These people had been my family. I had cooked for them, worried about them, loved them. And they had thrown it all away for money. What about Ethan? I asked Detective Martinez. He's a minor, and it seems like he was coerced. We'll need to investigate further, but for now, he'll go into temporary custody until we can figure out the best placement for him. Can he stay with me? Everyone in the room stared at me like I had lost my mind. Ma'am, Detective Martinez said gently, he helped them try to kill you. I know what he did, I said firmly. But he's still my grandson. He's still a 17-year-old boy who made a terrible mistake because the adults in his life failed him. Ethan looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. You'd still want me? Honey, I love you. What you did was wrong, and it hurt me more than I can say. But love doesn't just disappear because someone makes a mistake. Even a big mistake. Detective Martinez shook his head. Mrs. Thompson, I admire your forgiveness, but legally. Detective, I interrupted. I'm 75 years old. I've lived through wars, recessions, family deaths, and now my own family trying to murder me. If I want to give my grandson a second chance, that's my choice to make. I looked at Ethan seriously. But there will be conditions. You'll go to counseling. You'll testify truthfully at your parents' trial. You'll finish high school and go to college. And you'll spend every day for the rest of your life proving that you deserve the second chance I'm giving you. I will, Grandma. I promise I will. And, I added with a little smile, you'll help me plant tomatoes every spring until I'm too old to garden anymore. Despite everything, he almost smiled back. Deal. The police took Keisha and Chuck away in handcuffs. As they led them out, Keisha turned back to look at me. "Mom," she said, "I'm sorry." "I know you are, honey," I said sadly. "But sorry doesn't fix what you broke." After everyone left, Margaret and I sat in her living room with cups of tea, finally alone. "Helen," Margaret said, "are you sure about taking Ethan back?" "No," I admitted. "But I'm sure about not giving up on him. He's the only family I have left, and despite what he did, he's the only one who showed any real remorse." "What happens now?" I sipped my tea and looked out the window at the setting sun. "Now I go home. I fix up that guest room for Ethan. I testify at the trial. And I try to figure out how to rebuild a family from the pieces they left behind. And your money? Your house? Safe and sound, thanks to Mr. Williams at the bank." I chuckled, though I think I'll be changing my will. Instead of leaving everything to Keisha, I'm going to set up a college fund for Ethan and donate the rest to that organization that helps elderly people avoid financial abuse. Margaret raised her teacup. "To new beginnings? To survival," I said, clinking my cup against hers. "And to the power of a stubborn old woman who refuses to go quietly into that good night." The next morning, the local newspaper ran a story with the headline, "Local woman survives family murder plot, outsmarts killers." But that wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. 3 months later, I was sitting in the courtroom watching Keisha and Chuck's trial. The prosecutor, a sharp young woman named Ms. Chun, had done her homework. She had the video recordings from Margaret's house, the forged signature attempts, Chuck's insurance calculations, and testimony from the fisherman who rescued me. But the most damaging evidence came from Chuck himself. Apparently, after he was arrested, he tried to make a deal with the prosecutors by blaming everything on Keisha. Then Keisha tried to make her own deal by blaming everything on Chuck. Watching them turn on each other in court was almost sad. Ethan had to testify too. He told the truth about everything. How his parents had pressured him, how scared he was, how sorry he was. The judge was tough on him, but fair. He got 2 years of probation, community service, and mandatory counseling. When it was my turn to testify, I looked right at Keisha and Chuck as I spoke. I told the jury about trusting them with my life, about the Sunday dinners and family gatherings, about believing they loved me. I told them about the cold shock of hitting the water and realizing that the people I loved most had just tried to murder me. By the time I finished, half the jury was crying. Chuck got 15 years for attempted murder and fraud. Keisha got 12 years. The judge said their betrayal of family trust made their crimes especially heinous. As the bailiffs led them away in handcuffs, Chuck shouted something at me. Something angry and cruel about how I had ruined their lives. But Keisha just looked at me with those sad eyes and mouthed, "I love you, Mom." Too little, too late. After the trial, Ethan and I went home to start our new life together. It wasn't easy at first. How do you trust someone who helped push you into the ocean? How do you live with someone you nearly killed? But slowly we figured it out. Ethan kept his promises. He went to counseling twice a week. He finished high school with good grades. He got a part-time job at the hardware store to help pay for groceries. And every evening, he'd sit with me on the front porch and we'd talk about everything, his parents, his fears, his plans for the future. "Do you think you'll ever forgive me completely?" he asked one night about 6 months after the trial. "I already have," I told him. "Forgiveness isn't something you earn, honey. It's something you give. But trust? Trust has to be earned back, day by day. How long will that take? I don't know. Maybe years. Maybe forever. But I'm willing to try if you are." He was. The money that Keisha and Chuck had tried so hard to steal? I donated most of it to the National Center on Elder Abuse, just like I promised. They used it to create a program that helps other families avoid financial exploitation. They even named it the Helen Thompson Family Protection Fund. I kept enough to pay for Ethan's college and to maintain my little house. The house that Keisha wanted to sell to pay for my nursing home stay became the place where her son learned what real family looks like. A year after the trial, I got a letter from Keisha in prison. She apologized again and asked if I would visit her. I thought about it for a long time. In the end, I went. She looked older, sadder, wearing that orange jumpsuit instead of her fancy clothes. When she saw me through the glass, she started crying immediately. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I know saying it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I never stopped loving you." "Then why?" I asked. "Why did you try to kill me?" "Because I was drowning," she said. Chuck's business was failing. We were about to lose the house, lose everything. I felt like I had to choose between saving my family and murdering your mother. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I thought if I could just get the money quickly, before you got too old and sick, it would be like you were taking care of us one last time. By dying, I know how crazy that sounds now. But Chuck kept saying you'd want to help us if you knew how bad things were. He said you'd rather go quickly than waste away in some nursing home. I looked at my daughter through that thick glass and saw a stranger. Someone who had convinced herself that murder was an act of love. Keisha, I said quietly, I would have given you every penny I had if you'd just asked. You didn't need to kill me for it. I know that now. But then, I was so scared and desperate, and Chuck made it sound like the only way. We talked for another hour. She told me about her life in prison, about the classes she was taking, about how she thought about me every day. I told her about Ethan, about his progress in school, about the small victories and setbacks of rebuilding our family. When visiting time was up, she asked, "Will you come see me again?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "I'm still figuring out how to love you and protect myself at the same time." That was 2 years ago. I've visited her 3 more times since then. Not because I've forgiven what she did. I don't think I ever will completely. But because she's still my daughter. Love is complicated that way. Now here I am, 3 years later, sitting on my front porch as the sun sets behind the trees. I can smell the tomatoes growing in the garden. The ones Ethan and I planted together last spring. He's inside doing his college homework. He's studying to become a social worker. Wants to help other kids who get caught up in their parents' bad decisions. I have my favorite teacup in my hands, the one with the little roses that Harold gave me for our 20th anniversary. In the distance, I can just make out the glimmer of the ocean, the same ocean that was supposed to be my grave. People ask me sometimes how I survived it all. Not just the water, but everything that came after. The betrayal, the trial, the heartbreak of learning that the people you love most in the world could plan your death over Sunday dinner. The answer is simple, really. They thought love made me weak. They thought my trust, my kindness, my willingness to help them made me an easy target. They thought an old woman's love would make her defenseless. But they were wrong about everything. Love, real love, wasn't what made me weak. It's what kept me alive out there in that dark water. It's what gave me the strength to fight back, to be smarter than they thought I could be, to turn their greed against them. Blood may betray you. The people who share your name, your history, your Sunday dinners, they might smile at you while they're planning to destroy you. Smiles may lie. Hugs can hide hatred. Family dinners can disguise murder plots. But you know what? The truth always comes out. Always. Just like I did that day, gasping and fighting my way back to the surface when they thought I was gone forever. The truth always surfaces. And sometimes, if you're strong enough and stubborn enough, you can ride that truth all the way back to shore, where people like Joe and Danny are waiting to pull you to safety. Where friends like Margaret will help you fight back. Where broken families can be rebuilt, one careful day at a time. I'm 78 years old now, and I'm still here. Still growing tomatoes, still drinking tea from rose-covered cups, still believing that love, the real kind, not the fake kind that comes with conditions and calculations, is the strongest force in the world. If you've made it this far in my story, I want you to remember something. If you're watching this and you have elderly family members, check on them. Really check on them. Not just their health, but their finances, their legal documents, their safety. Because the sad truth is, most elder abuse comes from family members. People who should be protecting the ones who raised them, but instead see dollar signs where they should see love. And if you're an older person watching this, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let anyone tell you you're too old to understand your own money or make your own decisions. Stay sharp, stay suspicious when you need to be, and remember, you're stronger than they think you are. Like this video if my story helped you in some way. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what's one piece of advice you'd give to other people about protecting themselves and their families? Because at the end of the day, we're all in this together. And sometimes the best revenge against people who try to destroy you is simply refusing to let them win.